Hi, I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, teacher and podcaster, and you're about to start healing from your eating disorder and transforming your life and your relationship with food and body. I've worked in NHS and private practice supporting clients for 20 years, and I believe that recovery is possible for you. This podcast dives into expert interviews, evidence-based psychological approaches, and anecdotal tips from the therapy room from my years of experience. If you're wanting to heal your relationship with food, feel confident in your body, develop self-love and self-acceptance, and create a life of freedom and meaning, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for being here.
So today I have a guest on the show, and I am talking to Dr. Kamila Irvine, who is a senior lecturer in psychology at Lincoln University. Kamila specialises in body image and eating disorders and is particularly interested in perceptual body image and size shape estimation. Kamila completed her PhD at Northumbria University, focusing on body image, and then worked as a teaching fellow at Durham University before joining the School of Psychology at Lincoln University in May 2019. Kamila's research investigates methods of measurement and the development of new tools of body size estimation with the use of virtual reality and 3D body scanning. She's also working on a number of applied projects, including a virtual reality body image training and schools-based projects with Body Happy Org. In the episode today, I'm going to talk to Kamila about lots of fascinating things, her journey into this field and how she's become a body image expert and researcher. More about the job she does as a senior lecturer, including teaching students about eating disorders and body image and her interesting research. And then finally, Kamila's thoughts on the ginormous problem of how we change our culture and its influence on body image development, and how we can really shift this from grassroots level to really protect and improve body image of individuals growing up today. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Let's get to it.
Time for a short advertisement break. Are you a counsellor, dietitian, therapist, nutritionist, personal trainer, or other mental health professional? Are you seeing increasing numbers of your clients struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating? And are you keen to learn skills and strategies and build confidence in working with your clients who struggle with these issues? We know that increasing numbers of people are struggling with eating disorders, and we know that 85% of people with eating disorders are not underweight, and this means that many eating disorder symptoms are hidden. The Good Childhood Report in 2021 highlights appearance as a leading cause of unhappiness among young people and indicates that appearance concerns are increasing year upon year. So join my Eating Disorders Training Day on Zoom, face-to-face, or self-paced online. It will give you a really good understanding about the different types of eating disorders, including anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, and OSFED, with an introduction to RFED and neurodiversity and eating disorders. You will explore typical causes of eating disorders and understand how to create a psychological formulation for your client, and this will be brought to you by relating to client examples. I will take you through then my specific knowledge, skills and techniques, which can be used when supporting clients with eating disorders. You will get a full comprehensive training manual and access to the recording of the training afterwards and a full online version of the course. If you want to sign up, please go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk, and you might also be interested in my body image training for professionals too. Hi, Kamila. Welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Could I firstly get you to introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Kamila Irvine. I'm a senior lecturer in body image and eating disorders at the School of Psychology at the University of Lincoln. I'm also the program lead for our undergraduate degree of psychology with mental health. I also do other things, teaching, research with organizations, do some CPD courses, and basically, I have more pies than fingers at the moment.
Yeah, you sound very, very busy, but you clearly seem to love it. You look happy with your lot.
I do. I'm one of those academics that kind of go like, I like my job so much, but the next day I could be complaining about it quite a lot. In the end, being an academic is such a cool job because I get to teach students and I teach our undergraduate students. I have my specialist module in body image and eating disorders, which is a course for our third year psychology students. But also I teach about body image and eating disorders to our postgraduate students. So we have a number of master's courses, and that includes, for example, our master's in counseling, But also we have things like training for PWPs and the HIPPY, IAP pathways. One of the things that I would love to do at some point, we also have the doctorate in clinical psychology, and I would love to get my hands on those students at some point soon. We have a med school at Lincoln, so I'm hoping to get in there to speak to some trainee doctors at some point. That's kind of the teaching thing, and I really like teaching, and the students seem to enjoy what I'm doing. But on top of that, there is so much that you can do as a researcher in the freedom that you have in terms of the research that you choose to kind of follow, and you get to select the topics and the projects and the organizations and the collaborators. So I love having that sort of freedom to actually pursue my own interests in body image and eating disorders in terms of research.
Amazing. Well, it sounds fantastic to have that freedom. And you're obviously engaged with a subject that you're really interested and fascinated by. So, yeah. How did you get into this field? What led you to end up specialising in eating disorders and body image and all of these topics?
Long story or short story? I have two versions.
Perhaps a shorter story for today.
Okay, I'll do a midway. When I first came to the UK in 2006, I actually started an undergraduate degree in European and international politics. And after the first year, I decided that actually, no, I can't do psychology, because previously, spoiler alert, my parents in particular were saying, no, you can't do psychology. Yes, I can. So I completed the first year and then transferred to psychology. That was Northumbria. And I didn't know anything about psychology at that point, because while, for example, in the UK, you can study psychology at A level, that is not a topic that you can study in Poland before you actually go to university. So I actually knew nothing. I did not expect the statistics. I am not a fan of maths. I respect maths. I can do statistics very well now because I learned at uni. But essentially, I was going in entirely fresh. And one of the things that really got my attention were things like abnormal psychology, clinical psychology, different approaches to treatment and therapy. And as many undergraduate students, I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So I then followed my undergraduate degree with a master's in developmental psychopathology at Durham, thinking that I'll be applying for things like assistant psychologist posts with the view to later on do the doctorate in clinical psychology. As I was doing that, I was working as a mental health support worker. I actually started that when I was on my second year of undergrad. And I was working those services and I was seeing how people are working. We had a lot of multidisciplinary work with the service users that we had in terms of the NHS teams that were supporting them and whatnot. And I really liked what people were doing. When I graduated from my master's, I was looking for an assistant psychologist post, and I went to a job interview. And in that job interview, I thought I did really well. And then I got a call saying that I was not successful. And the feedback that they gave me was that they really enjoyed how I presented. And the post was to include some like data collection, a little bit of like this research component rather than formulation and assessment and stuff. The person who called me said that in his opinion, I would be really suited for a PhD with the sort of way that I was presenting and the sort of interest that I had. And the thought had occurred to me and appeared somewhere in the distance at some point. I was like, I could do a PhD. But at the time, I wasn't really kind of sure that that was the way to go. So I still was pursuing that kind of clinical, applied, I want to help people approach. And while I was doing that, I signed up for a counseling skills level 2 course. And while I was on that course, I met this girl who was doing an access course in order to go to university to study psychology. And she was saying that she was struggling with understanding some pretty basic concepts. So I sat with her and I started explaining to her, I think it was conditioning or something like that. It was really like year 1 kind of stuff. And when I explained it to her during the break, she said, oh my God, you're so good at explaining things. You should be a teacher. And I thought, that's cool, but I can't go back to uni. I need a job. I need to be working. And the teacher actually said, oh, if you want to teach adults, if you want to teach psychology, you don't need to go back to university. You can do a postgraduate certificate. So that's what I did, thinking, oh, I'm going to become an A-level teacher. if it's not going to be clinical psychology, I'm going to teach psychology because I really enjoyed explaining things to her. I did a postgraduate certificate in education and training. And as part of that, I needed a placement. And I got a placement back at Northumbria, where literally 2 or 3 years prior I was a student. And I started working as what some universities would call a demonstrator, some universities would call it a teaching associate or associate lecturer. Essentially, you work under the person looking after the module. So I did that for 2 years. And in the meantime, I was working as a research assistant at Northumbria, some shorter projects, some part-time work and whatnot. And that's when I met my future PhD supervisor. We aligned with some ideas that we had about body image and eating disorders, and in particular virtual reality and what we could do with that. And in the end, I applied and got accepted, got a full ride scholarship to do a PhD. Fun fact, I did do an eating disorders module when I was an undergrad on third year. This is one of my favorite stories to tell my students now when they bemoan getting a bad grade. I was late with submission of my essay because it was back in the days where you actually had to do it by hand, like handing a physical printed out copy of your essay, not online via Turnitin. And because I was late, I was graded a 0 as a late submission, and I had to resit the assignment in the summer. And the resit is capped. So I got a 40 for an essay that actually scored an 85, and that's my lowest grade on my transcript. And it's one of my favorite stories to tell my students, like, it doesn't matter what your grades are on the transcript, you can still do all right. So yes, I did do an eating disorders module as an undergrad. However, I did notice that it didn't actually teach us anything about body image. I don't know what the module is like now, but back in the day, it didn't really. So when I started my PhD, I started reading more and more and more and got really into the theories and the background and the history of everything from fat liberation and body image to kind of the history of the DSM. And I must say, there are things that I wrote in my PhD that even to this day, I'm like, now I would phrase it differently, because even since then, I have grown as a researcher. After I finished my PhD, I worked as a teaching fellow at Durham for a little bit before I got a lectureship here at Lincoln. So since being at Lincoln, I've developed my module. So that's body image and eating disorders module. We've only ran it for 3 years so far because I've only been here since 2019, I want to say. Yeah, 2019. So a lot of it was during lockdowns. That was fun. And like I said, I do keep up to date, and I still kind of grow as a kind of researcher and in terms of my knowledge and values. And like I said, I can do the research that I want to do. So I'm doing work that kind of builds on my PhD findings and kind of elaborates on those, but also I supervise students, so dissertation, master's students and PhDs. Quite often they come out with some amazing ideas and then we build on that. So right now we're actually writing a paper based on one of my two papers based on my dissertation students' work, because they just did incredible work and I think other people should see it. So yeah, that's kind of the mid-length description of what happened.
Sure. Well, it sounds like a really interesting journey, actually, and quite sort of serendipitous, things coming together. And I guess you just didn't know where you were going to end up, did you?
Honestly, I tell my students, because I am constitutionally incapable of shutting up about careers in psychology. And I talk to my students a lot about what is it that they want to do when they graduate. And I start that conversation from week 1, year 1 with my students so that we can plan and figure out what's best for them. But at the same time, my advice always is do not get too focused on the goal, because my goal for such a long time was clinical psychology. And actually, once I sort of allowed the opportunities that were presenting themselves to me to actually follow through with them, things fell into place. Things kind of followed one after another. Genuinely, the day I handed in my final files for the PGCE teaching qualification, that was the day I found out that I was successful in my PhD interview. And I think up until that point, so like maybe around 2013, 2012, I was a little bit too focused on wanting to be a clinical psychologist. And when I let go and I was like, well, let's see, where will this take me? What opportunities are out there? What can I do that's maybe not occurred to me? And just let go of this goal of like, I'm going to do clinical training. I think it even occurred to me that just let the current take me. And once I let the current take me, it worked out pretty well, I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's good advice for anyone listening, isn't it? Often when we kind of surrender to things a bit, they tend to kind of work out more. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of became more, this is where I should be rather than where do I want to be. And I allowed that to kind of happen to me.
Yeah, well, inspiring. So what's it like being a lecturer to students? Because I'm thinking like the students coming in these days are just so much more savvy and knowledgeable and understanding properly of body image and eating disorders or not compared to back in the day. So I'm wondering, like, are people kind of coming in with quite a fixed kind of diet culture, wellness influence view? And what kind of journey do you take them on?
The journey I take them on is in year 3 mostly. And like I said, it's not for everybody because it's an elective. So not all the students take it. But when it comes to year 2, when I do the developmental module lectures, that's compulsory. So the full cohort gets at least a little bit of introduction to the topic. In terms of the students that come in, they are not homogeneous. So quite often we get students who are already very much into this idea of love your body regardless of what it looks like. There are some people who are very much into the wellness and kind of healthyism and looks and appearance and stuff like that. We have to also remember that psychology students are what we call a self-selected sample. So quite often they are people who already had overcome their own difficulties or are in the middle of overcoming their difficulties, or maybe they have an experience of somebody close to them, a friend or a family member who suffered with some poor mental health, or a friend who was coming to them for advice and breaking the heart to them and telling them all of the problems. So they go like, no, I want to do this for a living. And that's lovely. We also get students who come in because they say, and I quote, that was the easiest subject at A-level. And I wanted to go to uni, so I'm doing this, which is, fair, if that's what they want. While we do get students who want to be in psychology, students who kind of don't have a fixed idea of what they want to do, there is so much variety. And a lot of kind of students that we see, they don't have an idea of exactly what they want to do. And I think that's a great attitude to have. And maybe you will not be a person who has the word psychologist in your job title, but everybody would benefit from some psychological knowledge and being psychologically literate and learning about research methods and kind of following the evidence and following what the research says is a very good way of thinking about the world. So I think anybody would benefit from a psychology degree. So I definitely like when people say, there's already so many. Good. There are many romance novels in the world. That doesn't mean people should stop writing them. We can absolutely saturate the market. We are seeing some worrying numbers in terms of people's poor mental health. And the more professionals we have to support people, the better. And even if you don't become a professional working in mental health, just having anyone who can maybe work as a first aider in their office or something, as a mental health first aider, that's already a great way to kind of contribute to kind of looking after each other. And that's lush.
Time for a short advertisement break. I want to tell you about Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. She is a board-certified integrative health coach, certified eating psychology coach, and certified functional nutrition counsellor. In 2012, she created the Freedom Promise in an effort to help clients transform their relationship with food from one mired in fear and confusion to one that is loving, nourishing, and sustainable. Inspired by her own recovery journey, she developed a signature system comprised of 7 steps. The framework offers an alternative approach to recovery as it's aligned with the principles of functional medicine. All systems are connected, everybody is unique, and everything matters. She guides you to listen to the wisdom of your body so you discover an empowering nutrition and lifestyle protocol that speaks to your unique needs. If you hunger for food freedom, Mindy invites you to a complimentary discovery session. During this powerfully eye-opening conversation, you'll explore the steps that will help you transform the energy of obsession to making lasting and sustainable changes in your life, including your relationship with food and your body. If you're seeking freedom from a relationship with food that's holding you hostage, if you're longing to find your enough, if you're feeling inspired by the possibilities that await you when you create the life you deserve and desire, contact Mindy today. The link to do so is in today's show notes. And what about the research side of things? So I guess huge topic, but what are you particularly working on at the moment or particularly interested in? I know lots of fingers and lots of pies.
So many pies. Okay, so at the moment we are writing a couple of papers. So I'll start with those two. One of them is based on the undergraduate dissertation by my student, Josie Binder. Hi, Josie. I told him we're going to make her listen to this. But essentially, the idea was that we wanted to talk to people who were sent to weight management as children and what is their relationship with their bodies, with food, with movement, with exercise. That's actually what I presented at a conference in Bristol in June. So if anybody wants to actually look at the slides, those are on my ResearchGate profile. Those are available publicly, basically. So that was one thing. In terms of what we found, basically it was like a kickstart for people's poor body image, for poor relationship with food, diet, and exercise, where there was a lot of othering, a lot of victimization, a lot of this sort of diet culture ideas that we see of food being good and bad and red and green and you should and can't have it, that sort of thing. Was basically, that's where they learned it. They learned it in those weight management programs, and they carried that forward with them into the adult lives. And for the participants that we spoke to, this was a kind of very tender topic. There was a lot of harm caused to them in terms of how they felt about themselves and how it impacted their relationships with people and stuff like that. It was pretty upsetting, and that's one paper that we're writing right now. Secondly, we did a study with my student Parker Carter. Parker suggested that we look at non-binary individuals. They said there is a little bit of research on trans people. Quite often that means a kind of comparative study where you get cis people and trans people and you compare different variables and whatnot. But within the umbrella of trans, there are people who are non-binary, and quite often they are overlooked. And most studies were not specifically looking at them. We decided to do that. What we were hoping for was to get maybe a couple hundred people max. We were kind of strategic about recruitment. We were thinking that it might be hard for us to actually recruit the sample that we wanted. We were very worried about enough people completing this online questionnaire. Parker managed to recruit 643 participants into this study, and every single one of them is either trans or non-binary. So within that, we had 170 trans men, 110 trans women, 261 people describe themselves as non-binary, and the 99 people describe themselves as other non-binary. This is the entirety of the sample. We have no cis people in there. And was essentially what we were wanting to do was to investigate how they feel about their body, so body dissatisfaction as well as body appreciation. So we have both positive and negative body image, as well as investigate a little bit of kind of impact on eating disorder symptomatology. So one thing to notice is that nearly half of our sample had previous diagnoses of either eating disorders or body dysmorphia. So that's in itself an interesting finding. But also we wanted to give them a little bit of voice and give them the opportunity to tell us things, because it's all well and good for us to decide what variables we are looking at, but we wanted them to tell us what should we be looking at. So we also did this qualitative component where they were asked simple questions like, what are any further experiences that affected either your body image or your eating attitudes? And they came up with some really interesting themes. So things like weight stigma, the gender dysphoria, the attitudes by parents, and the social comparisons that they were engaging as a result, as well as the impact of community, the socioeconomic status, the physical and mental health impact on their body imaging disorders, the neurodivergence, sexual trauma. So there was so much more to it than we thought to begin with. So that's just a snippet of that study. So that's what we're writing right now. Other than that, I'm working with the Body Happy org. So that's run by Molly Forbes, who's got an amazing book that's published, everybody. little plug there. Essentially, with Molly, what we are doing is we are investigating the impact of schemes of work on year 8 students. So Body Happy Org have lesson plans essentially for every single age in school to deliver body image classes to the pupils, because it's not something that's part of the PSHE curriculum right now, but it's so important. So what we did, step one, we ran some CPD courses with the teachers. Then we gave them schemes of work for the year 8s. And we have a control group, we have an intervention group, and we measured a number of variables such as the attitudes to the body and self-esteem, that sort of thing. So that's kind of ongoing data collection. They should be doing time point 3 right now. So time point 3 is for the students who were in the control group. They then get the classes delivered to them, and we're checking if they actually catch up to the people who had it in the first place. And then we are sending some questions to the parents to see if there have been any changes in behavior or conversations that are happening at home as a result of their children engaging in these classes. So that was basically 5 weeks, once a week during tutor time, they had body image classes. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. Other than that, I have a few projects. I developed this virtual reality perceptual body image training. So this is a published paper from 2019 where we had people with high body image concerns. And essentially what happens is they pop on a virtual reality headset. They are presented with a body of a lady in a bikini. This is a CGI model, so it's not a real person. And we have 15 different models, ranging from really quite thin to fat. And we ask them a very simple question: is she thin or is she fat? And they see every model 3 times in randomized order, and they just categorize them, thin or fat. We say, not comparing, it's not thinner than you or fatter than you or anything like that. It's just, what do you think of her? Then from that, we can calculate at what point do they stop saying thin and start saying fat. So if we were to imagine all of our models in a lineup, which ones did she say are thin and which ones did they say are fat? And from that, we can calculate what's called the categorical perceptual boundary. So that's your boundary from where you go from thin to fat. So with these participants, what we then did, for 4 days, they would then do the same task again, but then they would be given feedback. So that feedback is based on the categorical perceptual boundary. So let's imagine that they said models 1 to 5 are thin and 6 to 15 are fat. Then the 2 models closest to that boundary, so 6 and 7, if they said that they are fat, the feedback would pop up saying, incorrect, that body is thin. So we're trying to change their opinion of the 2 bodies closest to that boundary. We did that for 4 days. So every day they would pop in, do that training with the models. And we found that it actually does shift that perceptual boundary. So we can change what you think of those bodies. But also we actually managed to reduce the body image concerns. So we gave them some questionnaires about eating attitudes with satisfaction, depression, all sorts of stuff like that. That's despite the fact that at no point were we talking to them about how they feel about themselves. It was just what you think of this person. So potentially the mechanism here is that they were subconsciously comparing themselves to these models. Essentially, we all know BMI is garbage and it means nothing, whatever. We use BMI as a size unit in my research rather than anything else. And we noticed that our participants, if we were looking at their BMI and compared it to the BMIs of the models, they would have categorized their own BMIs as fat prior to taking part in this training. After training, their bodies were falling into the category that they now categorize as thin. So perhaps it had a kind of knock-on effect on how they feel about themselves. It's part of what we're trying to figure out exactly why that happened. So one of the projects that we are working on at the moment is replicating that effect. We are trying to get as many participants as possible, kind of going through this training. But also we realized that in real life settings, coming 4 days in a row to do this sort of training is not really realistic. We want to do something where it's a one-off. So maybe you come and see your therapist, I don't know, once a week, once a month, every fortnight. What's the impact of just doing it once? And I had some students this year collect some data. I'm going to have some more students collect some more data this coming academic year, because we want to get as much data as possible to see if we can have that same kind of shift within one session. Because if it's a case of your therapist or your counselor does this with you once, twice, maybe 3 times, but it's spread across, I don't know, 3-4 months or whatever, if that helps with kind of addressing your perceptual body image in particular, that would be great. Because the thing about perceptual body image is that you can't really talk about it as such. Like, talking therapy for perceptual body image is not really a thing, because I need you to visualize things and it needs to have these visual aids. That's what we're working on with that. Additionally, we are working on some more work on trans and non-binary populations. I always say participants because for me it's research.
Yeah.
Essentially, what we want to figure out is what are the needs of people who are trans and non-binary in terms of treatment. What kind of conversations need to happen and when, in terms of treating their eating disorders, or if they have poor body image, how do we talk about it? When do we talk about it? At which point in the treatment relationship, in the process, do we need to have that conversation? So that's an incoming project that we have. But yeah, I could spend another hour like just walking you through every single one of them. There's loads.
Yeah, well, I think you've just given us just like a little taste, haven't you? And I'm sure anyone listening who's interested in finding out more about these specific research studies, where's the best place as well to look for you for your research? I think you've sent me a link before, actually.
There are a couple of places. So ResearchGate is one of them, researchgate.net. I believe if you just look for my name, you will find my profile. And that's a little bit better than, let's say, Google Scholar, because if you put my name in Google Scholar, you will also find it. But the thing with ResearchGate is that there I can also put up things like my posters that I took to conferences, or you can see the presentations from conferences. My PhD thesis is available there, so I can put everything on there. Whereas Google Scholar is mainly focused on just the journal articles, so it doesn't have everything. But that's the two places, ResearchGate and Google Scholar.
Yeah. Okay. Well, brilliant. So I'm sure, because there's like so much in there, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that would be interested. And I'm so struck by how many people opted in for the non-binary study. I mean, I'm just thinking there must be so many people just wanting to have a voice and wanting to engage with these topics.
Yeah. It's the only time ever that I notice people taking advantage of the fact that in the documentation, so like the information sheet, the debrief, we always provide our contact details. And never ever have I had anybody contact me for no reason about the study. But I had people contact me saying thank you. Just the fact that somebody was looking at it and they were saying, oh, I've shared it with all of my friends, which is potentially how we managed to get that many participants. But yeah, I had 2 or 3 emails from people just saying that it's great that somebody's looking at it and that they feel seen and appreciated. I'm like, oh, thank you. My little heart.
Yeah, no, amazing. Well, I think it's groundbreaking work. It's so needed, isn't it? Really needed. So Kamila, I know you've just touched a little bit on some of the work you're doing with like Molly's book and like the work in schools. And obviously, I think prevention is better than cure, isn't it? With so much work around body image. And I know it's a huge topic, but what do you think are some of the key things that we could be really doing as a culture to really help shift body image? And I guess the shorter version.
Oh,
it's a big topic, isn't it?
The short version is that we do need, like you said, prevention. We need the kind of early years. So it's all well and good to be like, oh, this usually girl at the age of 18, 13 or whatever, oh, she's displaying some signs. We need to intervene now. And it's like, we need to have a situation where we are changing attitudes to food, body, exercise, and diet overall. This is the problem because societal change takes such a long time, such a long time. My thing always is we need the schools on board because that's where kids are spending most of the time. We need the teachers, the head teachers, and the schools to actually sign up for things like the workshops and the training that places like Body Happy Org are offering, because it's such a small thing to do to sign up your teachers for an hour or two of CPD, to purchase some schemes of work, to dedicate a little bit of time. And the thing is, with any prevention or intervention, it cannot be a one-off. It's not like, oh, we did a school assembly, so therefore all of our kids are safe now. They're never going to get an eating disorder. That's not how it works. A lot of the intervention studies show kind of an immediate impact after an intervention, but then at the follow-up, those things kind of tamper down. And that's because that message needs to be constant. It needs to be in the environment continuously, the same way as the negative messages are there continuously. So if we really want to fight things like, oh, the negative and horrible and misinformation things that children and young people are exposed to, we also need to continuously expose them to the other side of the coin. Things like I said, an assembly, great, but what is in the school's curriculum in terms of healthy eating? If you Google healthy eating resources for teachers, which they have to deliver to pupils, it's, again, red, green food, good, bad, should, can't have, this is a treat, don't have sugar. And it's not the sort of messaging. So it's just small anti-diet kind of messaging, the kind of all foods fit kind of messaging, movement in terms of enjoyment of movement. I think there's a lot of work that can be done with things like PE in schools, where we learn how to engage in activities that we enjoy and how to incorporate them into our daily life. So yeah, it's a culture change. And this, unfortunately, needs to start at school with the teachers. Perhaps one of the things to do is to review teacher training, and how do we prepare our new and incoming teachers about how to actually have these conversations with students, how to be an advocate for everybody is worthy of being looked at, and kind of how to respond to things like bullying. Does the school have policies about weight-based bullying? Does the school have policies on lunches where they're telling parents to not give their children sugary snacks? Like, sugar is fine. You're allowed to have sugar. You need it for your brain to work. It's those kind of changes, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work with many, many people.
Yeah, no, sure. I love the fact that you really emphasize there how we need to be continuous, ongoing with it, in the same way that the diet culture and wellness messages. And I think in a way, like you saying that, in a way, it's like, yeah, of course, that's obvious.
It's a systems change. It needs to be disrupted. You can't be like, oh, well, once a semester we do media literacy with our pupils. It's like, okay, but they are on their phones every day and you've done it once. That's not going to stick, especially with the teens or children. It's not going to stick. There needs to be repetition. There needs to be continuation of that kind of impact, not impact, well, what am I saying? Intervention, really. It needs to be continuous.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kamila. I think you are really an inspiration and a cheerleader and paving the way. I just think you seem to have a lot of just energy and enthusiasm, and you're obviously inspiring your students who are coming up with these amazing creative projects and changing the world. Really, really encouraging. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing about all the work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your work, because one of the things that I do in my module is I give homework in kind of non-academic work. So I don't always give them journal articles to read or textbooks to read. I give them other things, and in particular, things like your podcast and other podcasts such as Maintenance Phase, for example. I love to give them those to read. I give them things like Full of Beans to listen to, so they can get that perspective of lived experience, so that they can be exposed to how actually people experience things like that. And learning from somebody who works with people, because like I'm not a practitioner, I don't treat people. So hearing from people like yourself on your podcast about how to talk to clients and having those conversations is really impactful. And yeah, maybe it's an unusual homework to give to students at university, but I love sharing your podcast with them. So thank you for what you do too.
Oh, thanks so much, Kamila. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. Do go and check out all of Kamila's info in the show notes. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _. And for further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. enjoy this podcast, I'll be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.